Good afternoon, everybody. It's a few minutes past 1 o'clock, so let's get started. I've called for this public hearing today to get an update on the financial situation in the Claremont School District and to consider an amendment to the House Bill 292 that may ensure that Claremont students will be able to attend their local schools through the end of the year. We were all shocked to learn that Claremont is facing a $5 million deficit stemming from gross financial mismanagement. We still need better answers on what happened, but we now know that the district spent millions of dollars that they never had. Claremont has already taken several steps to address this situation, including closing an elementary school and relying on volunteers for sports and other extracurricular activities. My top priority has always been to ensure that Claremont schools can stay open through the school year, since most Claremont parents want to keep sending their children to their local school. The district has asked for additional flexibility in using its state's adequacy funds and has worked with the Department of Education and the state treasurer to draft the amendment we're hearing today, 2025-2978S. I've also asked Chairman Ladd and the House Education Committee to join us for the hearing, and I understand he has an amendment drafted, that's Representative Ladd, by the state agency to improve the language. Following this hearing, the Senate Education Committee will move into executive session to consider whether or not to move these amendments forward. If you'd like to speak, please add your name to the sign-up sheet. I would now like to turn things over to James O'Shaughnessy, attorney for the Claremont School District, who has prepared an update for us on the current financial situation. Thank you, Mr. O'Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Chair. May I take a moment? I'm going to turn on my PowerPoint. Okay, is that better? Yeah. A lot of pressure for entering a password. See, I didn't get it right. Let me see. Nope. Okay. Thank you, committee members, for having us here today. My name is Jim O'Shaughnessy. I'm an attorney with the Drummond Woodson Law Firm in Manchester, and I'm here on behalf of the Claremont School District. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce Carrie Kennedy, who is the current interim superintendent, sitting here. Thank you, Carrie, for being here, as well as Matt Angel, current business administrator for SAU 6. So those are the two individuals who are currently responsible for running the Claremont School District and are doing a fantastic job. Today, we're going to cover a number of topics. I want to give you a really quick update of what an SAU is, quickly talk about the current status of the Claremont District's financial situation, update you on the status of audits, budget cuts that you've heard about, and cover some of the other information you may have seen covered in the media to kind of bring it all into focus. I'm going to briefly give you a recap of what the RAN loan is that we've received from Claremont Savings Bank, talk a little bit about the adequacy revolving loan that's being contemplated, and then give you some information about what the long-term plan for taking corrective action and having accountability is. I'm trying to anticipate all the questions and thoughts that folks here and the community might have about the situation, and I'm happy to answer questions during the presentation or after the presentation at your pleasure. Okay, can I go ahead? Thank you. So quickly, an SAU 6 update. For folks who aren't familiar with how school districts are organized, an SAU is a school administrative unit, and SAUs are responsible for providing superintendent services to the member school districts. An SAU is a separate corporation from the districts that are members of the SAU. School districts are not required by law to have a superintendent on staff, but they are required to have some means of having superintendent services provided to them. SAU 6 is the SAU that serves the Claremont and Unity school districts. There have been a couple of SAU leadership changes over the last, seems like 6 months, but it's been less than maybe 2. On August 22nd, the SAU 6 board placed former business administrator on leave and hired Matt Angel. That current business administrator is now on unpaid leave. On August 29th, the director of student service resigned. The assistant student services director moved into that role. On September 8th, the superintendent resigned. On September 11th, Carrie Kennedy was named interim superintendent, stepping up in that role for the district. And on October 20, this past week or so, the HR director and assistant superintendent both resigned. So we've had a lot of turnover in the SAU office. I actually think they're handling it quite well, but I think it's helpful to know that there is quite a bit of turnover. And what we have are some experienced newcomers operating the district. And they're new to their current roles, but I think they're doing a good job and they're very much up to speed. What you all probably know is that they're leading the effort to address the district's financial crisis, which is now estimated to be a little over $5 million. Every other day, they are discovering new small mistakes, big mistakes, and trying to take corrective action. For those of you who are unfamiliar with how SAUs and public sectors operate, most private employees are employed at will. So you hear that term, that means they can quit at any time and be fired at any time with or without a reason, as long as you're not violating the law. Many public sector employees, most central office school administrative employees, most teachers in school district, I think almost all teachers in school districts are employed pursuant to employment contracts, police and fire chiefs, school superintendents. So the employment relationship is contractual by nature. That contractual employment agreement governs how you manage their employment and how you deal with resignations and terminations. Their formal agreements, the contract defines length of employment, salary, benefits, and also the terms for and conditions for termination, typically with some kind of cause provision. Claremont financial update. I'm trying to bring this up to sort of current as much as possible. Matt Angel is here today, so he can provide specifics. And the information I'm presenting here was compiled with the help of Matt Angel and Carrie Kennedy. So this is not all my information, it's coming from them. In August, after a preliminary verbal report from the district's auditors, the board announced that it is facing a deficit of between $1 and $5 million. The board has not been made fully aware of the magnitude at the time of outstanding invoices or cash flow situations. They were not aware of how bad it was until the middle of August. Payments to vendors had not been entered or reconciled into the accounting system. And at the time, the district owed a significant amount in arrears to health insurance, local contractors, private schools, auditors and legal counsel, special ed service providers, their school lunch provider, and the New Hampshire retirement system, to name a few. But there were several $1 million in outstanding payments due to these auditors, some dating all the way back to the later part of 2024. Current deficit, Mr. Angel announced a $5.0 million deficit. This was a couple of weeks ago. This was announced publicly. There was a newspaper article covering that. The district's goal is to reduce this deficit to about 1.9 million by June 30th at the end of this fiscal year. Mr. Angel had a very, I think, high hopes that he would be able to somehow eliminate the budget this year through cuts to current year operations. I think that was a very aggressive mindset, but I don't think he does not think he's going to be able to achieve this due to the recent reassessment from school care for Claremont is about $868,000. So that kind of put him in a spot where that amount plus what they are already carrying is not going to be able to be eliminated through cuts. So the projected $1.9 million year-end deficit is due to costs related to special education, teacher substitutes, and school care. The way we've tried to explain it, and Matt has explained it in meetings, is that there's a $5.1 million deficit, and we're going to show you how, but through a lot of aggressive cuts in operating costs this year, they've reduced that. He thinks through the end of the year, it'll be around $1.9 million. We're going to get a little more detail on that in another slide, but I wanted to kind of help folks understand how we got here, like a quick big picture snapshot. So grant reimbursements, that's where the district gets reimbursed for certain projects by federal grants. In December of 2024, federal grant reimbursements were held due to filing noncompliance by the administration, and the board was not notified. There have been fund balance miscalculations pretty consistently, but there are errors in calculating fund balance that resulted in a miscalculation of the 2025 local tax rate. That was a year ago. They anticipated having fund balance, which is, fund balances, money left over. There really was no fund balance. The district was in a deficit last year and claimed it had a fund balance. As a result, their tax rate was set too low. That means they started the school year off in a deficit position. Administration failed to keep the board abreast of critical information, including the December 2024 grant denial and misstated budget realities and cash flow issues. Administration failed to attend finance committee meetings with the auditor and the board liaison to the finance committee. A little bit more, independent auditors struggled to complete audits, and at an August 20th board meeting stated that this delay was due to district officials repeatedly failing to provide required information. As of September, the auditor issued a final year, fiscal year 2020 audited financial report. Health insurance data was not being reconciled, and there were several accounting errors in the district's health insurance. This is something that was reported in the media and briefly discussed at the last meeting. But essentially, in a snapshot, prior administration allowed 4 terminated employees to remain on their health insurance policy since 2024. That is something that Matt and Carrie discovered recently and corrected immediately. Another issue was that they have been under-capturing employee contributions to health insurance. Employees typically pay some portion of their health insurance every year pursuant to a collective bargaining agreement or board policy. When those policies increase from year to year, the employee's obligation and the district's obligation both increase based on a percentage, and the new policy numbers weren't being entered into the system, so the district and not the employees were absorbing the difference in health insurance. That has been corrected. And the prior administration failed to record retiree health insurance selections correctly, so they were paying more for retiree health insurance than they were required to. Those are some of the reasons why they were spending more money than they should have been spending. There's also overspending in FY25 from last year. The accounting system shows an overexpenditure of approximately $1.6 million. However, and this is according to Mr. Angel, the true extent of overexpending is greater due to health insurance accounting errors. This overexpenditure amount is likely to be up towards or slightly greater than $2 million. So that's where you have that 1.9 to 2 something million. The numbers aren't perfect, so he can't tell you exactly to the cent what the deficit is, but it's big. We talked about the general ledger. That's basically the where all the transactions, records, liabilities, assets, revenues, and expenses of the district are recorded. I'll just leave it at this. The general ledger effectively didn't exist when Mr. Angel took over the business office. It was meaningless. The numbers weren't reliable or accurate. And it wasn't being correctly maintained. Expenditures weren't being reconciled and entered into the system. He has been manually rebuilding that by tying financial records with external supporting documents, right? So bills and tying them to the system and manually rebuilding bank accounts, receivables lists, state and federal aid. So Matt's been doing that. It's a very labor intensive, inefficient way of doing it, but that has been his priority for the last month and a half. Audits and budget cuts. To update you on the status of audits, the FY22 audit report said that the left the district in a deficit for the beginning of FY22. The FY22 deficit was cleared, and FY22 ended with a small surplus. So the narrative that they've been carrying a deficit since 2018, and it's just kind of growing and growing and growing is actually false. They had a deficit in FY21 that was cleared in FY22. They spent less than they appropriated. They received their FY22 report, and the findings include there were board management oversight gaps, cash handling weaknesses, failure to perform regular reconciliations, inadequate record retention, unsubstantiated balances, auditors' repeat requests for information, and grant reporting gaps. The district's FY23 through 25 audits are being worked on concurrently right now and are in progress. The point of this is to say that the district's financial problems are not solely the result of FY20 through 22. They're squarely the responsibility of the immediately prior administration who was managing the finances of the district prior to Mr. Angel and Ms. Kennedy taking over. I'm going to keep going. How has the deficit been addressed already? So you probably know this from the media, but prior to the start of the school year, there were 19 new teachers who had been offered contracts, and the board hadn't acted on those offers, and the board elected not to accept those contracts, and all 19 teachers were essentially told they didn't have a job prior to the start of the school year. There were 20 open staff positions that were not filled. And secretaries and custodian positions were eliminated. So they conducted a RIF of around, there were 19 plus 20, so almost 40 positions prior to the start of the school year. The estimated savings for those positions is around $4 million. That may be an over or an underestimate, but 40 positions, you kind of roughly estimate being worth, $100,000 per position. That's a rough number, but that's approximate savings. SAU 6 staff reductions and resignations have resulted in an estimated savings of another $760,000. And just to be clear, Unity and Claremont are both part of SAU 6, but Claremont's obligation for operating expenses is like very significant, in the 90s. So that $760,000 savings for SAU 6 benefits Claremont significantly. You've already heard that non-required extracurricular activities, athletics, have been canceled for the school year from the board in terms of a funding mechanism. The community is successfully funding most of these activities through donations and sponsorships. I'm going to address that in more detail below, but Buff Elementary School was closed on October 6th. The students started their new school today. That has been a success as far as we're aware. Students in grades K through 3 start at Maple Elementary School today, and students in grades 4 and 5 started at Disnard Elementary School today. And all of the staff who are with those students remain with the students, moving as intact classrooms into those other buildings. 2 kindergarten classrooms and 2 third grade classes from Bluff were combined into a single larger classroom at Maple Elementary School. The move was done for primarily staffing purposes, to consolidate resources, to provide staff more support, and the closure is still estimated to save the district between $30,000 and $60,000 in heating, utility, and just the cost of keeping an empty building open. But the purpose wasn't a cost savings measure. That's a secondary benefit of the closure. A little more on extracurriculars and athletics. Stevens High School Alumni Association is serving as a district fiscal sponsor for donations. All the donations are being directed to them, and they can be earmarked or assigned to specific activities. Most recent figures, and these numbers change every day, but athletics has received approximately $93,000, and music, drama, arts, and other activities has received approximately $52,000. They received a large donation from Claremont Savings Bank in the amount of $100,000. So the community response has been tremendous. Currently, no transportation is being provided to any extracurricular or sports. And additional funding is still needed for them to be able to do this for the entire school year. So I'm sorry, that's a little bit of an opportunity to promote, but donations are still needed. State monitoring, as all of you folks likely know, the Commissioner of Education, Caitlin Davis, has been very helpful in working with us and supporting us. She was also instrumental in the folks in her office in helping the district understand that it was a financial crisis, and I guess sussing out the extent to which the business office wasn't properly or transparently reporting on the status of things. We will continue to meet with them regularly as they monitor what's happening. So there was talk months ago about the district getting a loan from Claremont Savings Bank. And what is this loan? The loan is really, the statutory name is a reimbursement anticipation note. It's similar to a tax anticipation note if you've worked in towns or county government. They're both forms of short-term borrowing that you can use to address cash flow gaps. A RAN is borrow money now and you pay it back with the disbursement of adequacy money. It's a revolving source of money that the bank has provided the district. It's a one-time authorization of $4 million. That's how much the district can borrow. It's capped at $4 million, and it has to all be paid back in April. So a RAN is set up like a revolving loan. It has alleviated the district's immediate short-term cash flow problems, but it does not reduce the deficit. It's not being used to pay off debt. It is being used to pay vendors. It is being used to meet payroll when cash flow gets short. It is being used to keep the doors open and the school running, but it is not reducing the deficit because it has to be paid back in April. So there's no net plus for the district on the loan. While the district is incredibly appreciative of Claremont Savings Bank's assistance, the availability of that RAN in the future is uncertain and not guaranteed. And I want to highlight that point because that's really why I think we're here today, is we're relying on a local bank to loan us loan the district $4 million to stay open and remain open. And that's really an untenable position for a school district to be in the future. Concerns for Claremont's ongoing stability financially is still a big concern for me and for the district. Claremont is operating with a deficit and has made major cuts in 1 year to its operations. Like unprecedented cuts have been made to the district. There's no precedent for that. It has no reserves. It has no fund balance. It has no capital reserve or expendable trust funds. There are no safety nets, in short. Large vendor obligations have been paid using the loan. Large staff cuts have put major pressure on current operations. There is still a relatively high level of turnover happening. Staff don't have a high level of certainty in what's happening in the district. And the district is not currently using substitute teachers due to the hiring freeze that has been implemented to not incur additional expenses. That's not long-term something that's sustainable. So conclusion and why we're here today is that Claremont is still vulnerable to a financial crisis, as Senator Ward has said. Okay, so quickly on to the concept of an adequacy revolving loan. I know there's an amendment that's been introduced, and I'm happy to have conversations about the mechanics of it, but the basic concept here is it would create a fund that allows Claremont to access its adequacy grant funds as needed on a revolving basis, and then repay those funds with interest. I don't really think of it as truly a repayment the way I think of it. I think it's kind of an offset because the state issues adequacy 4 times a year. So it would automatically offset what it paid the district based on what the district has already taken from the revolving loan fund. So it's a right to offset, and that offset provides, I think, the state a lot of security. You're already going to be paying that money to the state as adequacy, and this allows them to access that money sooner. I want to be really clear, like the Claremont is not asking for a bailout. They're not asking for a loan. These are funds that the district is already entitled to receive under current state law. The revolving fund would allow the district to access this money early on to help with cash flow as needed. It would all be paid back. They wouldn't receive additional adequacy or additional funding under the revolving loan. I know some folks are more visual, so this is my attempt to draw a little diagram, but in the top, first, the board votes to access funds if needed for cash flow. The state sends adequacy funds early to the district. The district uses the funds to pay bills and make payroll. Adequacy funds are issued minus the amount that has not been paid back plus interest. Okay, that's the general concept, subject to how you all modify the standard language in the amendment. A quick timeline of why we're asking for this and when it's going to be needed. So in March 2026, the district has its annual meeting. That's when it will approve appropriations for FY27. April 1st, 2026 is the final state adequacy grant payment. That's when they receive their final disbursement from the state. April 2026 is when the Claremont RAN is due. So right now, I'm thinking April is a big month. That's when we anticipate, and Matt anticipates, the cash flow issues will really become pretty significant. April through August, new teacher contracts and vendor payments are due. And typically April, early May is when school districts issue all their contracts to all their teachers and administrative staff, and soon thereafter, all their paras. So if we're not, if we have cash flow issues and financial instability in April and May, it's going to be very difficult to issue contracts and secure staff for next school year with that kind of uncertainty. July 1, 2026 is the start of the new fiscal year. That is late August is the start of the new school year. And September 1st, 2027 is when the first state adequacy payment is issued to the district. So I think of that time period from April 1 through September 1st as like they're going to have very, very difficult time with cash flow, paying vendors, paying payroll, paying for health insurance. And we're going to run into the situation that we were in this past August, where we're faced with uncertainty with respect to opening school. And that's why the revolving fund becomes so important. So the district anticipates using these funds for cash flow purposes from April to August 2026. Of course, there's a date in there where I think originally it was 2030, the deadline of when it sunsets out. That can be flexible. I think the idea of that sunset is if they encounter cash flow issues next year or the year after, this is a little bit of a cushion to allow them to kind of work through this, because when you're trying to eliminate a deficit through operating cuts and appropriations through taxes, it can be very expensive to taxpayers and very difficult to do. So the revolving fund, having that available for a year or two, is a little bit of a safety net for the district while they get back on their feet. Almost done. Is it necessary? So yes, it's a safety net. Our position is that it's really necessary so the school district can stay open all year and start on time next school year. The district and the community, I think, need this financial stability. I think the state needs this financial stability. Teachers and staff are offered contracts in April. Families make decisions about school over the spring and summer. I think all of us recognize the amount of stress and anxiety it caused all the families in the district and all those students in the district. We're trying to avoid having that situation happen again. Vendors need confidence in the district's financial stability. Our vendors, our special ed schools where we send students, our special ed providers, they need to know that the district is going to remain solvent in the foreseeable future. Obviously, if there were good alternatives, reasonable, if there were really any alternatives, we wouldn't be here. This is an extraordinary thing that we're all doing today to ask you to adopt special legislation. We wouldn't be here if there were good alternatives. First of all, under current law, a school district, a town can't borrow money or bond for operating expenses or for debt purposes. That's not allowed under the law. You can only bond or borrow for capital purposes. So we wouldn't be allowed to take out a bond to pay off this deficit or for operating expenses. The district cannot hold a special meeting to appropriate this money now because it's too late, and also it would require a court to approve the emergency and prove that this wasn't foreseeable. There's a little bit of a challenge here for the reasons I already explained. I think in some respects, some of these problems were foreseeable for the prior administration, if not the board, but it's too late now. And it would also mean going to court. That would take a couple of months, and then having a special meeting, and that's a two-part meeting because it's an SB2 district, and then it would have to go to a vote at the polls, which I think is a very untenable situation for them to be in terms of being able to operate. So there's no way for them to get more money between now and April. So most options for the district are foreclosed by current laws in place. The new administration in the district has already addressed this problem as responsibly as possible on a local level by making huge cuts to its operating budget this year. Long-term plan, I just want to cover this because I know folks are going to be curious and I want to be able to answer all your questions afterwards. But before I get to that, they've already consolidated elementary schools, and the goal is to continue to build efficiencies through consolidations. Matt Angel is helping them build a much better budgeting model. I don't want to go into details because I don't really know everything about budgeting models, but they're looking at special education. They're looking at transportation efficiencies. They're looking at better practices in HR for employee salary and benefit reporting. Obviously, they're rebuilding their ledger, improving cash flow projections for forecasting needs through next year, and improving internal controls over reconciliations and especially health insurance. Current controls already put in place. They have cash management system in place. So reconciliations of cash and health insurance, our cash is going to be projected to be completed this week. And health insurance reconciliations will be completed has been completed in the last 2 weeks. Mr. Angel has implemented a two-factor authorization for disbursements. That'll be implemented fully next week. Improved capturing of projected cost using purchase orders. That's something that was not done consistently. That will be done consistently. Improved oversight of stipend positions. There was a time period where former administration would write out stipends to employees with no oversight or approval process. Improved financial reporting to the school board and to the public. That's already happening. I think the school board is definitely paying very close attention to what's going on now. Both the Claremont and SU6 boards have revised and adopted numerous policies related to financial reporting and oversight. Additional accountability measures, they're finalizing their audits through their auditor. They have already contracted with an agency to conduct an independent operations review, which is effectively an investigation of how this happened to provide a higher level of detail than what I'm providing. The special education program audit is something they're working on and plan to do, and they're also working with Primex and a consultant to have a human resources audit completed. There are a lot of things that are just not being managed properly or were not managed properly that they're trying to fix, and it costs money to do those things, but they prioritize that in their budget. Finally, the district doesn't have other options, and the board voted on October 1 to formally request the general court to assist it through the establishment of a adequacy revolving loan fund. And as I've already said, without this in place, the district is really at risk. And I don't think that's good for the community, the region, or the state of New Hampshire. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. And this might be for another member that is here. But when you talk about reconciliation with the health insurance, are the employees that weren't paying in the amount they were supposed to, are they on a plan to reconcile that and pay that back?
Sorry.
Okay, so I'm Matt Angel, and for the employees that have been miscalculated, many of them, we are asking them to pay it back. The first 2 months of the fiscal year, however, the rates weren't charged correctly. So that's going to have to be a decision that's going to be made at the school board level.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. That's okay. Thanks. I thought of two questions. One, I heard you say that we started with a $5 million problem. You have 40 layoffs, which is going to save you $4 million. There's some other savings from other areas, but at the end of the year, you're still going to have $2 million problem left. So those don't add up to me, right?
Hold on. All right, so the way I calculated it is, if you look at your available budget, basically you look at what was voted by the taxpayers minus your current year obligations. If you look at what was cut out of the budget, what's remaining is $5.8 million of your current available operating budget. Out of that, if you subtract the $5 million that I calculated earlier, and then you look at some of the other costs that we're looking at, like $75,000 for the first 2 months of health insurance for the current year, $868,000 for the school care assessment, and then we have some other things. Once I got the school care assessment, I learned that there was no way I could make it out of the year without a deficit. So what we try to do is we try to look at our operations to make sure that we can make it through the year, because we're right now burning out our teachers by not having any substitute teachers. So the $1.9 million adds back $250,000 for substitute teachers, and then we can't hire enough people to meet our special education obligations. So we have to contract 6 paraprofessionals, 4 contracted teachers, 1 BCBA, and then we estimated $80,000 in supplies to each of the buildings, and then $500,000 for unforeseen costs. And if you think $500,000 for unforeseen costs is high, I call it the surprise $50,000 bill every single day. I in my email I get an invoice that we were not aware of, that the prior administration had obligated the district but didn't record it in the system.
Question number 2.
Yes, yeah, thanks for that. You mentioned a bunch of accounting errors. Were any of these accounting errors done in favor of the school, in the sense that we thought, you know, the accounts were better than they should have been, sort of? Because the reason is, if the accounting errors go both ways, I think of it as just incompetence. But if the accounting errors are all against the school district, I think of it as deliberate malfeasance. Do you see what I mean?
I can't speak about being deliberate or malfeasance because I haven't actually asked the people specifically. The example that I gave for accounting error is when you record your health insurance bill, normally you record it against your health insurance withholding line. And they recorded the entire amount there, but they never recorded the expenditure for the retiree health insurance. That amount is about $300,000 annually that we pay for retiree health insurance. So last year, our appropriation deficit or overexpend was 1.6 million. It should be 1.9 million. And then also I'm finding that it's possible that the district didn't budget enough money for its funding obligations for school lunch. I've been, again, with the $50,000 a day surprises, 2 contracts landed on my desk over the weekend that suggests that we have to contribute taxpayer dollars for school lunch that has not been included in the budget. So the accounting for those expenditures just simply doesn't exist in the system. And that's why if you look at some of my deficit calculations, school lunch is in a deficit by over $300,000.
Thank you. What does Claremont receive in adequacy funding each year?
I believe the adequacy, well, it's in 2 pieces. The first part is the adequacy grant, which is just over $16 million. And the adequacy grant is what we're requesting a loan from. The second piece for adequacy aid is the SWEP tax. That's your statewide income tax on your tax bill. We're not asking for a loan of that portion. I'm sorry. Okay, so on your tax bill, your real estate tax bill, it says state education tax. Sorry.
I mean.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's either 1.5 million or 1.8 million. I don't have the number off the top of my head.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, did you mention that the Claremont School Board is currently undergoing a forensic audit to determine what?
So they can't do a forensic audit right now because a forensic audit would mean they'd come in and take over all the books and all the accounting. And they would take Matt's computer and they would spend all day, every day for 2 weeks with him doing that. So right now is not an appropriate time to do a forensic audit. But based on my conversations, I believe their intention is to have a forensic audit performed. It's expensive, it's time consuming, but it also would, it would stop everything they're doing right now, and Matt's in the process of trying to figure out what exactly happened and what's going on with their books. And like he said, every week he's encountering a new mistake, and the mistakes aren't like small. Some of them are like the health insurance accounting errors are pretty big mistakes, several $100,000 mistakes that he's trying to figure out. So right now, no, but in the future they will do a forensic audit.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. I'm going to follow up, Madam Chair. Thank you. And so, being familiar with the terms and conditions outlined in these amendments, do you feel that those are sufficient to help the Claremont School District and SAA6 meet the needs so that they can recover from these errors and continue to provide a high quality education for their kids?
Can you help? Like, I want to say, yeah. I mean, I've seen the original version. Are there particular terms that you're thinking of? I'm sorry.
Specifically the 75% cap on the borrowing cap on that, and then the provisions to set an interest rate as defined by the state treasurer.
Yes, we're aware, and I think I think 75% of adequacy is ample cash for them to operate. Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Attorney and Matt. I'm curious to know how long is the cash that you have in the bank going to take? I've heard April 1 is a real critical date here. We have winter in front of us. Fuel tanks have to be filled up if they're not already filled. Acorns are on the ground. So how long will this cash take you through this year that you have right now at Claremont Bank?
Okay. I do have a cash flow in front of me. And when I kind of calculated March is going to be particularly difficult. And then we get our last adequacy aid payment in April. And that's when I'm going to be paying off the loan. The loan to Claremont Savings Bank is due April 17th. And then May, and then in June, we have to do our teacher summer pay. It really comes due June when we have to pay the teachers at the end of the year. And then it's going to be a struggle to maintain the district cash flow wise into the following year.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Angel, you have my utmost sympathy for the task you have at hand, because honestly, I don't think in my life I've ever heard a report that was as dismal as the one that we just heard in terms of what you are inheriting. And, God bless you for taking on it, because it's a lot. My question was on the current RAN. I am curious what the interest rate is and why are you concerned that you may no longer have the opportunity to continue financing through RAN type notes, going forward. So again, interest rate and future RANs.
Well, our current year adequacy is supporting that RAN. And so it's being used to pay it. Once the final payment is made, I don't have any collateral that I can use to borrow money. And it's also my understanding that without a long-term financing option like bonding, I can't carry debt beyond June 30th. So I have a hard wall of June 30th that I have to cross.
Clarification.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So basically what you are saying is that in the middle of the year, you can borrow based on the incoming adequacy, but once your last adequacy is coming, you have nothing, no other revenues, and you cannot take a RAN based on the future year adequacy, which would be in a different fiscal year. I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying correctly.
That's the way I understand it.
Thank you. And the interest rate on this, Ran, is?
What's the interest rate? What's the interest rate?
At Claremont is 2%.
Interest rate at Claremont is 2%. I'd like to add just one of the real reasons we're here and asking you is that we don't know if what Claremont Savings Bank is going to say now, or what they're going to say in August, or what they're going to say next October, or what other banks are going to say. And what we've heard from the auditor, and I certainly kind of feel this myself, is that given what's going on statewide, other districts talking about deficits. I'm a resident of Concord. That's been covered in the newspaper. I feel like banks may have a little bit of uncertainty about that type of lending. And that's what I think the auditor said that is in the meeting a couple of weeks ago, is that it's not as much of a short thing and maybe as it once was. So there's real concern about it's an if they're going to loan the money, and that if has become a little more questionable than it was in the past. So that's not the kind. We don't want to say, well, when we run out of money, we're hoping the bank in the future will say they'll lend us money again. For a school district, that kind of dependence on a bank, I think, is not workable. So we're hoping to avoid having to do that.
Representative Kofod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've heard reference to different things. I've heard reference to an accounting error. I've heard reference to accounting errors. And then I've heard reference to general ledger balances not being brought forward or reconciled and such. I want to echo my colleagues' comments that I do not envy the cleanup job you are doing and the mess that you have been left with. I guess, my question is based on that last piece, the general ledger piece. It sounds to me that, there's certain things that may have been errors that were systematically done over and over again, like improperly recording retirement obligations. But it seems to me that if general ledger balances were not brought forward, then even the most basic accounting functions simply were not being performed, like balancing the checkbook. How much cash do we have and how many checks do we have outstanding? Am I wrong in that analysis?
You're absolutely correct in that analysis.
Thank you.
I can give a concrete example. A couple of weeks ago, Matt and I had a phone call, and I was like, "Can you have any documents you could show me?" And one of the documents he showed me was the MS-24, right, which is the document that the district submits to set the tax rate. And in that document, there is a number for fund balance, right? So whatever, that's going to be taken off the top because that's already money in the bank. And it said $390,000 fund balance. And then Matt pulled up the district's bank account for that same time period, which showed a negative $2.5 million balance. So the ledger was like, we don't know what's in the bank, but we're going to just keep rolling forward.
Representative Earth.
So if I understand this all correctly, and I reiterate thank you for stepping up and doing this, but this has been going on for a couple of years. I think you said things cleared in 22 or 21, somewhere in there. And if I understand correctly, that administration has been serving until just recently. How could this not have been brought up to the board, to anybody else? How could it have been hidden so well for a number of years, not just a few months? I'm wondering about the liability of the people involved.
I'll probably could write a book about this afterwards to try to identify what are the red flags that should have been caught or weren't caught. There's just far too many. One of the things we know is that the administration wasn't bringing manifests to the board to sign on a regular basis. They weren't bringing reports to the finance department on a regular basis. And when those documents were requested, there was always a level of pushback and resistance. So the board frustration over why aren't we getting this finally sort of grew to the point where they reached out to me and asked for help figuring out what was going on. And then we reached out to the state, and then I reached out to Matt, and like, so I don't have a great answer for how long or why this was going on. It's just bad bad procedures internally within the administrative office that like no one ever fixed it. And then a new administration would take over and they would say, we're fixing the problems that were happening in the past, but they weren't fixing those problems. Maybe they were fixing some of them, but they were just being perpetuated. So they really need to clean house. And I think that's what they're doing. I can't explain it. I'm not on the ground in the SAU enough to really be able to explain how they got here all the way.
Follow-up?
So just to be clear, well, I guess one question is, how many administrations were in there? I thought it was just the one. But more importantly, you never talk about the board. I mean, the board let this go on. You said that they get pushed back and they would just sit back. I mean, the board's been the same for the last few years, or has that also been changing every year or every 2 years?
I think the board's been relatively stable. There are new members that have come on and off, but I personally haven't worked with this board since I really started in July. But yeah, I mean, the board they have obligations to oversee what the SAU is doing. And to some degree, they didn't know what the SAU was doing, and that has to fall on the board at some point. At the same time, they hire a superintendent, and that person's certified, and they delegate and trust that person, and that person hires a BA, and they delegate and trust that person. So I think a lot of boards fall into that level of like trust and complacency, and they don't know where to look for the red flags. They don't know when they don't need to just trust somebody, but they need to see the documentation. I don't think the board here knew what they didn't know.
Any other questions?
Representative Colcomb's over here.
Representative Colcom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. It is unfortunate that you guys had that experience. Your business administrator actually was formerly the business administrator of my district, and I saw this. We were fortunate enough to walk away with a 3.1 million surplus, though. So I apologize. I feel bad that you guys are in the situation you are. If I may have a couple of questions. I heard the attorney mention that you guys do not have any trust funds. Are there any expendable trust funds that were created by the school district over the years? And were you guys one of the districts that had that contingency allowance into a 2.5% into an expendable trust fund? Or was that not allowed?
Do you know?
Oh, I can. Okay, so the contingency trust fund, let's just deal with that one first, okay? All that is just a reservation of fund balance. Basically, you're just taking it out of one pocket and putting it in another, okay? When you're facing a $5 million deficit, you have no contingency fund because it can't exist. Otherwise, the deficit would be just that much larger, all right? It doesn't go to the trustees of trust funds. It just remains on the balance sheet, okay? The second part, or the first part, is reserves, like other reserves. I believe the prior administration depleted all the reserves before the end of the fiscal year, last fiscal year. So I think I got a list from the trustees, and I think it was about $30,000. And in my opinion, it was the city who funded that.
Thank you. Follow-up? Is the business administrator still on payroll right now? And if she is there a reason why she has not been terminated for cause, given all of these errors that have been made?
Great question. I have to be a little bit careful how I answer because the person is under contract and I don't want to violate that individual's rights. They're on unpaid leave. They have a contract. The contract has a provision for termination for cause, and the board has met and they are scheduled to hold that hearing. If they do hold the hearing, it's their intention for it to be public. I don't want to say anything else besides that because I don't want to, I don't want to violate anybody's privacy rights.
You got a question?
So Representative Kofalt.
Thank you. So you a moment ago you brought up the fact that school boards may or may not consist of people who have the financial acumen to really understand their responsibilities or their oversight. I think many of us are concerned. We're concerned with making sure that the people of Claremont are ultimately able to continue with our schools open, but we are also concerned that this should never happen again in other districts. So one of the issues or concerns that I have is that the state really has very little power to come in and inspect records or make sure that things are in order with school districts. If the DOE or the DRA or someone else at the state level had the authority to come in, inspect financial records and make sure things are on track, might this situation have been avoided or at least discovered and mitigated before it got this serious for Claremont?
Well, historically.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so. I think the answer has to be yes to me, because when the commissioner and I had a conversation about what was going on, and the folks from the finance office and the DOE, like they were concerned that something wasn't right. It just seemed like something doesn't seem right here. People who are in the field can kind of obfuscate and create confusion by saying, I can't create a beginning balance on my ledger because the audits aren't done. That sounds like something that could make sense, right? Like you'd say, oh, that makes sense. Really, it's sort of two different things, but folks on the board are like, all right, okay, that makes sense. And people who don't understand finance might say, all right, I get it. The audits are outstanding. How would you know what your beginning balance should be? But when in fact, that person should know what their beginning balance is, and they shouldn't be relying on the audits. And audits aren't usually done at the time you're setting your beginning balance anyway. So one thing I think would be a great idea, I know other folks are talking about it, you have control over when you issue your adequacy money. You can set requirements for annual audits. You can set requirements for when they're submitted. You can open a process up, or the DOE could come in and ask to inspect something, an audit, or if they look at an audit report and something seems off, they can come in and ask questions and tie your adequacy to that. There's a lot of different ways you could exercise some oversight based on the adequacy money that you turn over to the district. It seems reasonable to me. I would have a hard time seeing how this doesn't result in that. I hate to say it, but I think this is a big enough situation that we want to avoid it from happening ever again in New Hampshire.
Representative Ladd?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a few moments ago, you mentioned that the administrators depleted the reserve accounts. That's a real concern to me. We have reserve accounts for rolling stock, capital, buses. We have reserve accounts for maintenance of roofs and maintenance. Usually in towns, now I understand we're talking a city here, but towns have to have a warrant article to approve use of funds from a reserve account. Is there no check and balance in Claremont to ensure that somebody's just not taking something from a reserve account or deferring maintenance? And
First. So Matt's going to answer specifics that I may not be aware of, but first of all, with respect to the law, the district is a school district, so it's still subject to the same laws with respect to non-capital and expendable trust funds, right? They're subject to the same law. If it requires the voters at an annual meeting to create the fund, it requires voters at an annual meeting to appropriate money to the fund, whether it's from taxes or from fund balance. I don't want to confuse folks. If it's not, the legislature, when they adopt those funds, can also name the board as the agents to expend. And that's pretty much what every district does. And if the board is named as agents, they don't need to go back to the legislative body to expend. They have to hold a board meeting. I believe they have to hold a public hearing. I don't recall. But there was a board meeting this spring to utilize the special education reserve funds. And that's, I believe, what Matt was saying when he said they were depleted. The administration asked the board to tap into those reserve funds to pay off some of the special ed expenditures from last year. I don't know about the other funds. I have no history of that. I don't know if Matt does either. But it's my understanding that the board are agents for those funds, and the trustees of trust funds really hold the line on that, right? They are the ones who know whether this is an appropriate purpose, whether you are agents and have authority to access the money or not. So I don't believe there's any impropriety there, but I'm only familiar with the special ed specifically.
Thank you.
Representative Colcom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In all of the conversations that I've heard and read about Claremont, I have yet to see, maybe I've missed it and I apologize if I have, but I've yet to see any conversation about where the treasurer has been on this. The schools are supposed to have, to my knowledge, are supposed to have a treasurer, the school boards, and the treasurer should have been doing the bank reconciliations, with my understanding of what the treasurer's responsibilities are. Where was the treasurer throughout all of these problems?
That's a hard question to answer because I wasn't here. I have seen the treasurer of each school district just once, except for the SAU. And what I found difficult for this current year is making sure that they're informed of when we're making disbursements. You have to understand I'm rebuilding processes that just haven't existed in the school district in like 5 years, and making sure that the treasurer is notified of all payments made. So it's a difficult, I don't think I can answer your question adequately.
I don't think the treasurer is really serving a treasurer function fully in Claremont. I don't want to beat around the bush on that one. So, okay.
Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. In respect to the grant money, and correct me if I misunderstood you, there was an anticipation of receiving money through certain grants that were applied for. They were rejected for noncompliance, or they're not approved for noncompliance. How come that money was still budgeted for, or there was a belief that that money was going to be received?
Oh boy, the grant accounting is a difficult one. Let me just kind of answer that broadly. I have seen in the system charging expenditures to grants, close grants, and I've had to move that over to the general fund. So half of that is I'm not sure if they were really tracking grants well enough to even recognize that, to answer your question, okay? What we've tried to implement this year is adequate grant accounting to make sure that we're not spending funds before the authorization, and that anything that we spend before the authorization, we find an appropriation for that in the general fund. But for last year, it's the Wild West.
So what happens when you don't get the grants that you thought you were going to get?
Okay, if you don't get the grants that you thought you were going to get, the general fund is the fund of default. You have to find the funds within an appropriation within the general fund. It has to be paid through taxpayer dollars at that point.
Follow-up?
But and thank you for taking my follow-up question. So why was there such a strong belief by the board or by the district that these funds were going to be received when they clearly weren't?
One of the struggles that I have, people ask me to try to draw down money on some of these grants, and the accounting is so bad that the expenditure has to fit within that grant obligation, okay? So if the grant is to buy a school bus, it has to be an invoice for a school bus. If I can't find an invoice for a school bus, I'm not going to apply for it.
I think he's asking more generally, like, how do grants work? Offsetting revenue, like, how do you know to put all this anticipated grant revenue when you're building your budget?
Okay. The attorney was talking about how you build a budget, including grant revenues, And so when you're building your operating budget, basically it's your general program, which for regular education, special education, then administration, and then you look at your grants. Grants would be like Title I, which would be reading and math, Title IV-A, and IDEA, which is special education. Those title grants, you include that in your operating budget. Any other grant that you receive outside of that, you usually bring in through school board authorization through unanticipated funds. So you have to find some sort of authorization within the law to spend the money, okay? So when you're building your operating budget and you have a grant in there like IDEA, you have to have a revenue offsetting the expenditure, okay? So that it doesn't impact the real estate tax dollars.
Can I ask one last follow-up?
One more follow-up.
So, but these grants ultimately, I think, if I understood the presentation correctly, in 2024, it was known that they were not in compliance, or they're not being received. Yet it was still budgeted for as an anticipated grant, money to be received. And I understand that, nothing's guaranteed, so sometimes you'll have, and it will still be accounted for, the expenditure will still be attributed to the general fund, just so that there's money to pay for if the grant doesn't come in. But in this case, it doesn't sound like that was done. It seems like it was kind of a belief it was a done deal that they were going to get it. Why was the board operating under that belief of this district thinking they were getting something that they've already been told they're not?
So the timing's interesting. So you're building your budget, and in your budget, you have anticipated grant revenue. Districts always have grant revenue, so you have to have offsetting revenue on the other side, right? And then they go through the year and they do things. Some of the things, and they're already getting that, they're already built their budget, they already got taxed. They do some things, they spend some money, they build some projects, whatever, and then they submit some of those bills to be reimbursed under the grant, and it gets rejected. And that's, in the timeline, that's what happened. They did projects that weren't authorized under the grant for a variety of reasons, or because they didn't have good documentation, or it wasn't a proper use of the grant. So that's a bad internal practice. That's really how it happens. It's a bad internal practice because it wasn't an approved purpose, or they didn't have the right paperwork. They submit it, it gets rejected. So instead of getting the $100,000 that's sitting in their account at the state, they've got to use tax dollars to pay for it. That's the best explanation. I mean, it's a mistake, and districts should spend all their grant money and access all their grant money and do it appropriately. But when you don't, you end up with a spending deficit or revenue deficit. Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you two very much. Hang around. Was one more? Who?
Oh, sorry.
I see one over there. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you so much.
Representative Brown.
Yes, Mr. O'Shaughnessy, earlier you said that the board was unaware of this situation until middle of August, I believe you said. But I've been reading through some of the minutes of the Claremont School Board, and it is true that the Finance Subcommittee met rather irregularly during the last few years. However, the financial reports, the audits they received on their finances were consistently giving out repeated warnings of situations needing attention. It said that the state reporting had violations. There were large purchases made with personal credit cards without with reimbursement, but with no purchase orders being created. There was a failure to follow competitive bidding policies. So this has been going on for some time. I know the financial audits aren't the most exciting reading, but the school board is the oversight. The state is not to blame. It's the local school board that is responsible for overseeing and paying attention to these details. So I do not believe this is a surprise or suddenly something that was sprung on this particular district.
Was that a question or a comment?
I guess it was just a comment, but I would be happy to hear if they had significant financial subcommittee meetings that I'm unaware of.
Okay.
I'm not personally aware because I haven't been working with them directly for a while. But I take your word for it. You did your homework, and It sounds to me like they weren't watching things as closely as they should have been watching things and weren't reading those audit reports as carefully as they should have been reading the audit reports. I seem to recall hearing somewhere along the lines that audit reports weren't being shared or weren't being like discussed or disseminated in detail. Yeah, I think that's consistent with, I know they weren't aware of the extent of how bad the problem was. I don't think I want to represent that they shouldn't have known or there weren't things they could have done earlier. I don't think that's true. I don't want to make that statement. And I also want to be clear, this is the district's problem. They're in this problem. They got themselves into this problem. I've said it a lot. I've been quoted in the newspaper far too many times. They need to fix this themselves. They don't blame the state for this problem. This is not an ask for the state to bail them out. This is an ask that you give them access to funds early so that they can work through the problem without hurting the community and the kids and the teachers.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be extremely brief.
Okay, be brief.
You mentioned repeatedly that you keep finding $50,000 surprises and whatnot. Could I ask you, what is your best guess in terms of how far along you are in terms of fully understanding the extent of the problem, and how long do you think it will take till you really have as good of an understanding of the current situation as you can? Because again, digging through Georgian staples tends to take a long time. So,
okay. I think some bills are going to come out of the woodwork for the next year or two. Okay. But really the best way to handle this is to build a really good budget for next fiscal year and manage it appropriately.
Representative Fellows, did you have a question?
Yes, I'm just wondering, I know that the School Board Association has extensive policies and procedures that they share with their members about operational, issues. Does your district have a procedures manual related to the budgeting and the accounting? And if so, where did that come from? And so I'm thinking about just making sure that all districts have something like that.
Okay, so the policies that she spoke about, basically it's like a subscription service through the School Board Association. And we do have that as a district, that subscription service. And there are policies that the district has. So what we try to do, or what the normal practice is, you pull down what is recommended and then you modify it to the local community. In this particular case, some of these policies are the purchase policy that is the one that I have to deal with, and in my opinion, it's been watered down to a point where it's difficult to try to stop some of the expenditures. And I know the school board is actively trying to update the policies to make sure that that they're more robust policies on hand. Okay.
Anybody else? Because we have some other people who like to speak. If not, thank you too very much
All right. Thank you.
for your presentation. I have Representative Ralph Bohm who wants to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair and senators and members of the House Education Committee. For the record, I'm Ralph Baum, Hillsborough District 38, representing the towns of Hudson and Litchfield. And this is my 9th term, 18th year. 12 of those years have been on education. I was formerly a selectman, budget committee, and on the school board. Now, on this issue, I would recommend a no. This will set a precedent. if we create a way for the state making loans for this, then how many loans can we do? Concord is saying they're 5 million short. Some years ago, Litchfield had a similar problem. Found out after a business manager quit and an audit showed problems. 1.5 million, but Litchfield is a bit smaller. Believe problem is taken care of by financial management, moving funds around, doing away with some trust funds and all that kind of stuff. Also, March election. Can put a warrant article in for the current year. I've been there, done that. So there are ways of doing that. So, and I don't think, also, Claremont is a city. The town of Pelham is bigger than Claremont. So I think some of the problem is their city. Anyway, so I think we should not set a precedent, and so, thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Bone? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative John Clothier.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Joint Committee.
Turn on the mic.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody hear me now? No. Okay, thank you. I'm still getting used to these things after all the years I hear. Okay. So I am State Representative John Cloutier from Sullivan County District 6, which comprises the communities of Claremont and Croydon. And I'm here in support of Senator Ward's amendment I just had cataract surgery, so bear with me, House Bill 292. And I commend Senator Ward for taking some action to help us out in Claremont. It's been a very few rough months in my community, and as a longtime native and product of the Claremont school system from grade 3 to high school, I'm very concerned about this situation, how it affects my community. And we have a very good school district, in my opinion. I've also served as a substitute teacher for many years in the Claremont School District. So I think we have some dedicated people on the staff, and it's just a shame what they've had to go through and the cuts that have had to be made. And we had to close the Bluff School. Very unfortunate, but it had to be done. The school board had to make some tough decisions. And the idea that this is a giveaway, this is not a giveaway. This is a loan that Claremont has to pay back as I read the amendment. So it's tough, but I'm going to be honest with you. There may be some other school districts out there that may, are suffering, whether their problems are as bad. And to say who is responsible, I don't, of course, first of all, we got to keep the schools open. But second of all, we got to determine exactly the causes and who is responsible for this happen. And then whoever the people or the persons responsible, we've got to, appropriately, and I don't know whether it was professional incompetence or criminal negligence. That is yet to be determined, but hopefully we'll have an audit and maybe a forensic audit. And I don't want to cast aspersions because I just don't know. I'm like all my constituents. We're still up in the air about what's going on. But I urge you to pass this amendment or some other version of the amendment like Representative Ladd has proposed, because we need help in Claremont. We're going to pay this back. This is not a grant or a giveaway. This is to help the Claremont School District and the Claremont School Board get through the next year, keep the schools open, and hopefully and be able to reopen next fall. So I urge you, please, to vote for this amendment in some form. And I mean, I'd be happy to work with you, but we really need some help in Claremont right now. Thank you.
Any questions for Representative Ruth Clothier? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Megan Tuttle.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Senate and House Education Committees. For the record, my name is Megan Tuttle, and I'm the president of NEA New Hampshire. We represent about 16,000 educators across the state, including the dedicated educators of the Sugar River Education Association, the Claremont Association of Secretaries, as well as the Association of Maintenance and Custodial Employees. The students, families, and school community of Claremont have been through one of the most difficult starts to a school year that you can imagine. And that's why I'm here to testify in support of the amendment to House Bill 292. This amendment provides some certainty for this amazing community in what has otherwise been a turbulent ride these past few months. Because of the hard work of the dedicated professionals in the school community, we're now at a point in the story where we should feel confident that we're making an investment in the education of our students with the passage of this amendment. At the end of the day, it's the students who will bear the benefit or the brunt of the state's actions at this moment. When I've spoken with my members in Claremont, I've heard consistently their appreciation for the community that has stepped up in these difficult times because they support their local community public schools and want to make sure Claremont students continue to have access to a quality public education. Further, it's clear that Claremont's community understands the important role that teachers, paraprofessionals, and staff play in the delivery of education, reaching out to ensure that they've taken care of as well. As you may have heard, they've received numerous donations from their community and from outside sources, making it hard to list them all. And it is so heartening to hear and to see the community recognize that supporting educators' well-being ultimately benefits the students. One story of many that stood out and truly exemplified the spirit of Claremont was during the recent move to Maple Avenue and Disnard Elementary Schools. Teachers, staff, and community members collaborated to help displaced teachers from the recently closed Bluff Elementary School prepare their new classrooms, ensuring that their students felt nurtured and safe. Despite the difficulties in Claremont, the community, staff, teachers, and students are working hard to make a difficult situation manageable. Teachers and staff have put in significant effort to ensure that students have as smooth as possible transition into their new schools. Over the last few weeks, we've heard numerous stories about teachers helping out one another, staff members asking what they can do to help, community members and high school students volunteering their time. It has, in essence, been the embodiment of what it means to have a community public school. Tammy Yates, the president of the Sugar River Education Association, wrote to me just the other day to say this: "I'm proud to work alongside such excellent teachers and staff. Most importantly, I'm grateful to be part of a community that has stepped forward to ensure that children are minimally affected by this situation. We all have work to ensure the situation does not happen to another New Hampshire school district. There's certainly a larger discussion that needs to be held about school funding, about the necessary controls and processes that should be in place going forward so that our educators have the support they need to do the job of ensuring every student receiving a high-quality education. But today we're here for Claremont. Claremont parents and community members have stepped up for their students. Dedicated educators have stepped up for their students. Claremont students have stepped up for each other. Now the question is, will our elected officials step up for the parents and students of Claremont? In that vein, I ask this committee recommend ought to pass on Amendment 2978 to House Bill 292. Thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Megan Tuttle? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Carrie Kenny from the SAU, did you want to speak? You didn't check off yes or no, so I'm asking you if you have something you want to add.
Good afternoon. I just am here to humbly ask for your approval of this. We are looking to desperately support our students, families, staff, everybody else in the community. They have really stepped up. I appreciate Ms. Tuttle's comments. I could never be prouder of working anyplace else before, having only been here for a few months right now, but I'm giving everything we can to support our students and staff and families. They deserve this, and nobody wants to be behind a school that closed and a system that closed too. So I just appreciate any support you could give us.
Anybody has any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
David Trumbull.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and committee members. My name is David Trumbull. I'm from the town of Ware. The reason I'm particularly interested in this is I had run for state senate in District 8 this past year against our chairwoman, Senator Ward. and spent a lot of time in Claremont. I was there every week for months and months. I was back there this year for the back to school kickoff event in one of the big ball fields in town. Every agency in town has a tent, and kids go around and they get free school supplies. So I had a chance to talk to people like the week before school started. They were very concerned, but this is a strong, resilient community, and they did not want a handout. I want to say that I support the intent of the bill, which is to keep these schools going. They need the cash flow, but we need to be real. This is not a real solution, and it is not a lasting solution. And I say that for 3 reasons. First, the state of New Hampshire actually owes Claremont at least $4.6 million a year more in state funding. That would be the required amount to live up to the New Hampshire Constitution as upheld by the recent Supreme Court decision in the Conval case. If you go to the New Hampshire School Funding Fairness Project website, they'll show you how much each town would receive if HB 550 had been passed. That's increasing base adequacy aid to 7356. That'd be $4.5 million. If HB 651 had been passed, which is base adequacy, 72% increase, and differentiated aid, Claremont would be getting $6.3 million more dollars. This bill, while it's good because it keeps the schools open, maintains the state's allegiance to the idea that underfunded schools are the town's problem. Only if you are at the point of closing your school or rescinding dozens of essential teacher contracts will we loan you money with interest. Today, I think, would be a better day if we viewed this as an opportunity to finally live up to our constitutional duty to adequately fund the public schools as is required by our state constitution. Second, this bill hurts tomorrow's school children in Claremont. First of all, you have 40 educators who are no longer working there. That means that everybody there is working harder. They have larger classrooms. There's less programs. It could be less reading programs, or it could be less math problems. There's a reason why Claremont was at the heart of the original lawsuit over 30 years ago. This city lacks the property tax base to adequately fund the schools by themselves without true support from the state government. Given their property tax base, the people of Claremont are already paying an incredibly high property tax rate, and they can't raise that any higher. That's why the school board can't go back to them and say, let's raise our taxes by $5 million. The funds to pay back this loan will come from smaller class sizes, less reading programs, less math, less art, less music, and less AP courses. Third, the state must share some responsibility for the financial crisis in Claremont. And don't excuse the mismanagement at the level that you've heard this discussion today. But the status quo's financing system makes situations like this inevitable and nearly impossible for towns and cities to recover from on their own. Witness the other schools in New Hampshire that are facing shortfalls. When the state only pays 20% of the cost of funding for public schools, unlike the 50% all around the rest of the country, this is inevitable. And the reason why self-help can't be done is that if the town has no property tax base or an inadequate one, they're already taxed to the maximum and they have no other way to raise money. There is no way for that town to self-help. If it was a wealthier town and they had a mismanagement issue, they could go to their taxpayers and say, we need to get out of this. But Claremont is not in that situation. I'm not excusing mismanagement, but I say the state must also look itself in the mirror and say, we bear some responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members here? Don't see one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else in the audience who wishes to speak? Representative Fellows.
Yes, I'd like to have somebody come and explain us step by step exactly when the money goes in and out of this revolving fund. What is the plan like when, for this first year, how much money is going to go into it?
State Treasurer, is that something that you can tackle, or maybe Commissioner Davis?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, State Treasurer Monica Mazzapelli. The only thing I could probably be able to comment on is the idea of this revolving fund will be when the district needs the money. Once all of the details are clear, we'll be able to advance the funds. Again, it's adequacy aid money, so the district will have access to those funds at that moment. We'll disperse the funds, calculate the interest, The interest that, again, in this proposal is a borrowing rate, so we will use the municipal market data yields to calculate as a proxy to calculate the interest. And again, it will depend on, and then when it's time to disperse the actual aid, those funds will be subtracted from what's owed, principal and interest. So in general, those are the mechanics how this will work. But again, the details will need to be discussed and agreed upon.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
No.
Okay.
So for this current year, that they've already received their 30% payment for adequacy aid in September, their 30% adequacy aid for November 1st is going to happen before this could possibly be passed. So we're down to 2 distributions of adequacy aid, January 1st and April 1st, for 20%, which is about, maybe about $4 million for each, rounded, each of them. And so I'm wondering how much money is going to be in there when they try to do this drawdown, draw any money, because immediately on, if they draw any money, then on January 1st, they're going to have to pay back, their January adequacy aid if they had borrowed on it.
Yes, no, great question. I think, so it sounds like they will, the funds, one of the payments will be used to repay the loan that they have with their local bank. They will receive the last payment of the adequacy payment in April. My understanding that this will allow them to borrow against next year's adequacy aid. And so that will allow them to, again, have cash in advance, be able to pay their bills, and again, be able to balance their cash flow.
I'm still not hearing how much money is going to be in the account.
Okay.
Let's say in December, because if they borrow it in December, then they'd have to pay back, some in January.
So the total amount of what they received for adequacy is about 16 million.
18
million.
Yeah.
So again, we will advance the funds only what they need. We don't need to advance more than what they need. So they will, again, those are the discussions that will have to happen, and again, discussions that the Department of Education will have to agree upon.
I'm asking how much money will be available for them to borrow
up to
December.
Again, in December is all what they will need. I mean, essentially, in theory, they will have access to the 18 million and the 18 million for this year and then next year. So
that's
75% of that. Thank you.
Sorry, Representative Fellows used to do my job, so she knows the details. Mark Manganello with the Bureau of School Finance. Talking with Matt Angel, as you can see in the amendment, there was all parties involved agree to the terms. So the treasurer, the Department of Education, and Claremont agree to the terms. So it's going to be based on my conversations with Matt and what the treasurer just explained. It's going to be based on what they need. So they can they can loan out. So the warrant is up to 75%. As you can, in the amendment, 75% is the total adequacy warrant they could put into the fund. And then what they draw down is say they know they have $4 million hitting in January 1st. They might want to draw $4 million in advance of January 1st, and then it would be paid back. And so they could sort of a pay-as-you-go system. So exactly what they would want, what their needs are for December 1st or January 1st, we wouldn't know at this time, but it's going to be available for them as they need it.
So so let's assume that this bill won't pass until December, and so they only have two adequacy payments left. Are you going to put 75% of the 18 million they're getting this year, or are you going to put in about 8 million, which would be the 20%?
So for this year they already have the RAN and they can make it to April. So they do not. I would not expect them to have needs to go past to make it through. They can make it through April without using this funds. The conversation we're going to have. The Warrant Authority has a max. So we're going to have a conversation with them about how much they think they're going to need, and then we're going to put that into the fund. That's how I envision this working, but it's going to be a conversation with all parties involved. So if they need this, and it would be for essentially that bridge from April to next year. So it's going to be essentially, as you pointed out, next year's adequacy, because they're good for this year. They just need an advance on next year's adequacy to make it through May to September 1st is when they start getting adequacy payments. So the activity, does that clarify?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yes. So can I translate that into being that you're not going to give them, could put in there about 18 million, what you're really going to have available up until July 1st? Well,
So I don't anticipate them to ask for 18 million or 75% of 18 million. So it's going to be likely what they'll ask for is just a front of their adequacy. So they'll do it in chunks. So lower their interest. I would imagine they want to lower their interest payment back to the state. So they would do it.
but they could ask for 18 million?
Wouldn't get it. Yeah, it's all parties agree to the terms. So I don't think we would agree to that. And I don't think they would agree.
It's what it says.
Happy? Are you satisfied?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you both very much. What? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a quick question. Thank you for taking that. What is the current interest rate that they would be charged?
Great question. So that will depend on the market conditions at the time, but right now what I can share is that the 5-year municipal bond yield is about 2.3%. So it could go up or down, but that will be, again, that's what we'll use for proxy or borrowing rate.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, if there's nobody else who wishes to speak, we will adjourn this meeting.
You want to have that other amendment?
Have an executive session afterwards.
No, but do you want this explained? We were going to explain.
Who was going to, do you want to explain it?
I'll do that.
Okay. We're not ready to finish yet. The Representative Ladd is going to explain what the amendment is all about.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. There are two amendments which we have in front of us here. One of which is 2978S, that's a Senate amendment. And then there's also the House amendment or contribution to this, it's 3004H. I'd like to explain 3004H. It keeps everything that was in the Senate amendment in this. However, we've added some areas which bring in a little bit more accountability for the Claremont School District. And I'll start right on the first page and look at the statement of findings and look at, we made one word change there to the amendment. Where before the amendment from the Senate that reads, the General Court hereby finds the Claremont School District faces immediate and extraordinary fiscal challenges that may impact. We took the may out, that impact. These are extraordinary situations which are impacting right now. They're doing it. The next change which we had is on line 20 of the Amendment 3004H. On line 20, where it says the Claremont School, from line 19, yes?
Page 2?
No, we're on page 1. We're on page 1. Let's start and read the sentence right there on line 18, where it says, the intent of this subdivision is to provide a targeted, temporary fiscal stabilization mechanism through the establishment of a Claremont School District Adequacy Revolving Loan Fund. The Senate amendment stops right there. This adds in, administered by the state treasury. This bill has to be administered by someone, and it's going to be administered by the state treasury. Going on to page 2, jumping right down on page 2 to the middle of that page, starting with line 17, that first sentence right there reads, loans issued from the Claremont School District Adequacy Revolving Loan Fund shall bear interest at a rate established by the state treasurer, which shall be based on the state's current cost of borrowing. And then it goes on, a quorum of the Claremont School District's governing body, the commissioner of the Department of Education, and the state treasurer shall all agree to the terms of the loan. Here's where this amendment kicks in some further language. A loan which shall include terms requiring the Claremont School District to report monthly deficit, status, cash flows, audits, and status of any outstanding audits to the Treasury, the Department of Revenue, and the Department of Education, and timely submit all required reports consistent with RSA 198-4-D to the Department of Education. That sentence right there, that's been added in here, requiring reporting to the people who established this legislation right here, which would be the Commissioner of Education and the State Treasurer. Jumping down further, on line 30, when we're talking about the terms of this loan and interest, it adds a Roman 3. If the Commissioner of the Department of Education and the State Treasurer determine that the Claremont School District fails to comply with loan terms pursuant to this section, the Claremont School District's ability to raise future loan funds shall be withheld until the district complies with required loan terms received and accepted by the Commissioner of the Department of Education and the State Treasurer. So throw some accountability in this, that you're going to operate according to these terms. The reporting will come into the departments and the treasurer. If that stops, the loans will be withheld until such time that those reports are submitted with that other information I quoted earlier. The last change is on page 3, but it starts with a sentence on the bottom of the line, page 2. All funds borrowed from the Claremont School District Adequacy Revolving Loan Fund shall be repaid by the Claremont School District no later than June 30, 2029. This changes that date from 2030 to 2029. And one other change which I would make that's not in this, it's on line 3, the date of July 2, 2030 should be changed to 2029. You'd have a fund sitting there with no activity going on in it. So those are the changes. There are a few changes which add to the amendment brought forth by Senator Ward, but it adds some accountability and responsibilities for the Claremont School District to report to the folks that were in this. I also want to clarify one thing. We're not talking about any new money in this. This is previous year adequacy money. So no new money. It's not, a loan of new money. It's not that. It's contrary to that. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Representative Popovich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank Representative Ladd for working to make a specific suggestion onto an amendment. I just would like to say that while we definitely must do something to address this crisis because this is unprecedented, I think that we have to do much more than what this amendment does. A couple of things that I would like to do differently if time allows are, I don't think it's okay to pass legislation addressed to one town. Any legislation that we pass here should be open to any other town that finds itself in this situation. If, God forbid, there is another town a year down the road that manages to dig themselves the same hole, let's hope never, this should take care of that. I also want to remind you that we've heard from multiple people testifying that the district will have the ability to function through April, and really their deadline to get new funds is the repayment of the RAN, which would be April 17. Rather than going through this very rushed process, which leaves almost no time to discuss many complex issues. I think we would be best served if we try to get the bill quickly, through the Senate in January, and we can rush it through the House and probably have it to the governor's desk by February. There are things that we have to address. One of the major things that we need to address that we are not addressing here is that this hole was dug on the watch. At the end of the day, the top responsible body is the School Board of Claremont. And we're going to now ask the same people who dug this hole to plug it with the funds, the same hole that already leaked millions and millions. Now, I understand they are working on it, but I don't think it's a good practice to give this support without having many more specific terms that need to be met in terms of oversight, in terms of process changes that need to be provided. And frankly, I'm really bothered by the fact that the current state law does not allow for a recall election in Claremont, so that town voters who feel that they need new boards don't have a mechanism to do so. And no, even if I wanted to provide them an amendment to do that, I couldn't have because of the timeline of this. Also, we are skipping all debate in the House. The only opportunity we'll have to discuss this in the House will be as a message from the Senate and a concur, non-concur vote. We have the time to pass a bill through the normal process, introduced in the Senate and then expedited through the House. We are all aware of the timelines. This is not something that will be lingering on, but please consider that a complicated mess that's still unraveling, we're still trying to understand what happens, needs a more thorough solution. This is a Band-Aid, a well-intended Band-Aid, which we will have to address this, but we do have a few months to research this more and come up with a better solution that will address this as a package instead of just patching one hole. So that would be my request to, the Senate committee that needs to vote on this, and that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One more.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in response to the representative, I agree. I have a bill in for receivership this year because we've seen Concord is having an issue. We don't know how many more of these are going to pop up. My district of Manchester is looking at a $12 million deficit as we go forward that's going to have to be addressed. So I agree with you. This is a statewide issue and we need to address it as such. So I just want to put your mind at ease that we're looking at it as a bigger picture. Thank you.
Senator Altshuler.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I have a question for Representative Ladd on the amendment. And with respect to some of the statements, made, it's not the kids' fault that there's a leak in their boat, but there's a leak in their boat. So we have to plug up the leak and then we can review why there was a leak in the boat at a later date, but we can't let this boat, the Claremont boat, sink with children in the boat because we want to look at the structure of how the boat was built or the maintenance of the boat. So I think we have to stay focused on these kids need the school year to continue. And that's why we're addressing this right now. Representative Ladd, my question is on line 30 of page 2. If the commissioner of the Department of Education and the state treasurer determine the Claremont School District fails to comply with the loan terms. So the intent, I just want to clarify that the intention is that the Commissioner of Education has a collaborative role with the state treasurer on determining what the terms of the loan are with regard to accountability.
Go ahead. Okay. On line 30, you're talking regarding the new language underneath the terms here.
Yes.
Where the Commissioner of the Department of Education and the State Treasurer jointly will determine and look at if these reports are not coming in, and they have to do this jointly, then monies will be withheld until such time. I'm sure you withhold funds, the reports will fly right in. We saw this happen earlier when we were looking at the Commission for Public School Improvement, when a number of districts were applying for grant money for security, safety, access, all that in schools, security. And when the Director of Homeland Security announced that, where are all the emergency management plans? 80% of them had not come in yet. Within 2 weeks' time, they all flew in. And they were all submitted so they could apply for these grants and receive those funds. But there has to be some kind of a hammer or accountability oversight that the Department of Education and the State Treasurer have here. It's simply not enough to say, we're going to do all this, but not have that hammer. Yes, we have LSRs that have been submitted, as Senator Sullivan has just said, that she has one. We have several in there dealing with power and authority of the Department of Education. What do they do in a situation like this? How do we handle the RAD, the Reimbursement Anticipation Note? There's a lot. This is a wider issue, but I will say one thing. I'll go right to the top of the amendment, and we're talking about a school district facing immediate and extraordinary fiscal challenges. The challenges and the fiscal issues encountered over in Claremont are very different than what you're seeing with those 40 communities that are having school care issues right now. They have reserve funds. They have had planned. There's auditing going on. There are issues which are occurring to ensure this is just one of those happenings that school care is laid down on would be $173,000 or $2 million. And they're being hit with that. That's not as extraordinary as this. And it would be up to the state treasurer and the Commissioner of Education, Caitlin Davis, to make sure that this, in the future, we address these issues along with the legislature. But this one right here, we got to keep it narrow in scope. We need to help those kids in Claremont. I got grandkids right now, seniors in high school. They're looking at college. They're looking at scholarships. We don't want to subtract that and take that away from a kid in Claremont today. That school has to stay open for the rest of this year. This is one way of doing it. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
May I follow up, Madam Chair?
So what on this side here?
May I follow up? Follow up. Yeah, thank you. So, other question for Representative Ladd, and thank you for your very strong words about the Department of Education needing to be very present in accountability for fiscal expenditures in education. My question is, you had a line change in page 3 on page 3, line 3, to bring the date back to 2029. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? Did I write that down correctly?
Yes, that's the one.
Pull it back a year, okay.
Change the one on the previous page, yeah.
And is that because we anticipate that Claremont will be level set by then? They'll be out from underwater?
I think I can't answer that question because I'm not in Claremont. I'm not working those books. I'm not an auditor. I think that's better answered by Jim Asanashi,
Angel,
or Angel, or by one of the state treasurer or the Department of Education.
Good question. I think the 2029 is fine. We're hoping to have this resolved by the end of next year. The additional year or two is there in case as a safety net, but 2029 is acceptable.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the clarification.
All set? Any other last minute questions? Representative Kofalt.
Thank you. So I am concerned, as someone else raised the point, that this sets a precedent. I think there are a number of school districts that are in potentially difficult times, perhaps not as bad as Claremont, but I do think it's only a matter of time before someone else comes with similar problems. So to that end, I guess I want to acknowledge that, you know, that this is a dire problem for the Claremont district. It is urgent, but it is not immediate. So, April is when they have to pay back the loan. We do have plenty of time to go through a more deliberative process. I think that good legislation rarely emerges from a rushed process, and this feels like a rushed process to me. We heard earlier that the district is learning, it's a $50,000 a day process of learning about new things coming in. I think that it serves us well to take our time with this, to look at it as the district is not on the hook, or they're not under a cash flow crunch until they have to pay back that loan. And with local control comes local responsibility. And I am concerned that we don't have the necessary guardrails in place. We should be putting guardrails in place, both in terms of state oversight, such that we can avoid this ever happening in the future, and accountability for local school districts that if they're going to come to the state and ask for extraordinary measures, that the state should have some guardrails and requirements that school districts should adhere to. So again, my concern is that we look at this not as one half of that ledger. I think we should be looking at both. Accountability being the other half that seems to be largely missing from this. And we have time to do that. So I think that it would serve us well to be more deliberate with this process.
Representative Luno.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So first of all, I just want to come out and say I appreciate and support both amendments that we've seen presented this afternoon. Both your amendment, Madam Chair, as well as Chair Ladd's amendment, and I appreciate the accountability section in there as well as strengthening the statement with respect to the crisis that the Claremont School District faces immediately. But that all said, though, I think it's really important that we as a legislature act right now, because kids in Claremont deserve a high quality education, just as all New Hampshire kids deserve. And it's the state's responsibility and obligation to see that this happens in Claremont. And while I don't think any of us are turning a blind eye on local boards' financial fiduciary responsibility, what's being proposed today in both amendments is the least of which the state can do to help mitigate the damage and make sure that the district can recover and continue to meet the educational needs for their community. I think this is important to do while we can do it now, and I think the plan that you've put together in the Senate, together with the House, can achieve this on a timely basis for Claremont, and I don't think it prevents us from acting in a more comprehensive way down the road, as Senator Sullivan was suggesting. So I think we've got an opportunity today to act now and make sure that we can secure things in Claremont for the benefit of their students, to continue to receive a high quality education, and also prevent this from happening again. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? I think everybody who wants to speak has spoken. And I think at this point, we can adjourn this meeting. We're going to have a 20, what? We're going to have a 20-minute break.
Yeah.
Yes. No, it's a 20-minute recess, and then we'll come into
You
executive
want to just close
session.
down the hearing. Yeah, and then you.
Okay, I want to close down the hearing.
Yes.
And we're going to take a 20-minute recess,
Sounds good.
and then we'll come down in executive session.
You gotta do something, you gotta do something
Yep.
now.
Yep.
No.
My caucus is
We're gonna go right across. For Republicans and the Democrats.
Okay.
Where are you going, Grant?
Across the hall.
Or you can go downstairs one.
The Senate Education Committee will come out of recess. And based on all the information that we have learned today and with the discussions that we have had, I think it is wise, and we have decided to not go into executive session today, but to think about what we have learned and do an executive session later. And you will be informed when that's going to happen. So this concludes the hearing and no executive session.
Senator Ward, thank you. And I appreciate all the opportunity to hear from different people today, but can you give me a timeline on when we're going to go into executive session? Is this planned now that we're not going to bring this?
I will have Aaron get in touch with everybody and find out a suitable day.
Okay. But will it be before January?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
thank you. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you,
Oh, yeah.
Senator Ward. Okay,
This bill is subject to the same referral deadlines as all the others.
thank you. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. That's what I need to know.
So,
Thank you, Senator Ward.
thank you.
I just got off lunch for my